Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who would like to wish all of his fellow residents of the benighted States of America an unhappy July 4th. Now, July 4th, 2022, when I'm recording this, is the day that Killer Mike released the song Run, and that's what I'll be talking about. But I'd like to start off by taking you almost 30 years ago, October 3rd, 1992, when Sinead O'Connor performed the song War by Bob Marley on Saturday Night Live. At the very end of her song, she takes a picture of the Pope. Now, it turns out it was actually her mother's photo of the Pope. She takes it, and on screen, she rips it into quarters. And she screams out, "Fight the real enemy." Now, this got her banned off of NBC. It got her booed off the stage at a Bob Dylan tribute concert a couple weeks later. In some ways, it really hurt her career. But I believe this to be one of the best and most effective moments of protest music in music history. You see, she came from Ireland, where there's lots of strife and war between Protestant and Catholic forces. But she knew that the real enemy aren't the other people, the people of Ireland. The real enemy was the power up top, was the people who were directing the people to fight against each other. In her mind, the real enemy was the Pope. Fight the real enemy. That's my message to you on this July 4th, and I think that's Killer Mike's message as well, or at least one of them. I'm going to be talking about his song, primarily the video version of the song. I'll include a link to it up there. If you haven't seen it, it's important, it's good, it's interesting. And it features Young Thug and Dave Chappelle. So, his gift to me on this July 4th is something to talk about. I almost did a video about Jimi Hendrix's performance of the Star Spangled Banner. I almost talked about Les Claypool's performance of it. I had a whole bunch of thoughts, but instead I get to try to unpack this release on July 4th. This reminder to fight the real enemy. And the way that Killer Mike is telling us to fight the real enemy is by protecting black art. And let's go further. Let's protect black artists. He is challenging us to understand and accept the fact that as a society, we are not protecting black artists. So obviously, Dave Chappelle is what everyone is going to be talking about. I read several comments already. Isn't Killer Mike an ally? Is he not an ally of the LGBTQI+ community? Of course he is. So then how can he possibly platform Dave Chappelle? Well, let's get into this. I mean, if you think of Dave Chappelle as a millionaire celebrity, which he is, he's indefensible, okay? What he said and what he's done is completely indefensible. And I understand that a lot of people take that position. But as a black artist, it's a totally different question. And if you haven't seen FD Signifier's video about Dave Chappelle, GOAT or TERF, watch that. He says it much better than I do from a much more informed standpoint than I have. But still, let's not forget something. The civil rights leaders of today are entertainers. And this doesn't just go for the African American population. This goes for basically everybody, but they are the civil rights leaders. We don't have Malcolm and Martin. We have LeBron. We have Killer Mike. And yes, we have Dave Chappelle, whose comedy has done a lot to further African American rights and the culture in terms of how it understands black rights, how it understands injustice. It has. He has reached people, he has entertained them, while also instructing them on a lot of these systems. So, if we understand Dave Chappelle in that light, we have to go back to his original point. Okay, his second point is basically garbage, defensive, defenseless garbage. His primary point is that black rights feel as though they are never going to be respected, that they are always going to be put on the back burner. That women's rights and then gay rights and now trans rights pop up, and their movements for recognition, for validation, have more success than any of the black rights movements have had, even though those have been going on for literally hundreds of years. Now, obviously, this is a point which fails to understand intersectionality. It is a point which sees these fights as zero-sum games, which they are not. But still, I mean, let's be honest. When I was growing up, I never knew that gay rights were a thing. And then at a certain point, I understood that they were a thing, and then all of a sudden, there is gay marriage. All of a sudden, there is a real movement towards true equality. I never thought of trans rights as a thing, ever, at a single point in my entire life. It's not that I hated, it's not that I didn't hate, it was that the thought never entered my mind. Never, not once did I think about it, ever. My entire life I've been thinking about African American rights, I've been thinking about injustice and slavery and redlining and all of these great, gigantic problems. And then a problem arrives, a problem is explained. The problem is always there. Trans rights are human rights. There's no question about that. There's no question that this needs to be a fight. It should have been a fight. It was unjust that it was not a fight. But the larger point, that something which was not on my radar has now had this much success. And let me make this clear. I want complete success. I want total equality for trans people entirely, with no reservations whatsoever. I would die for that, okay? I'm not saying that, like, this is one is better than the other. But that was his initial point. And then he got defensive, and then he started making transphobic jokes, and then he lost the point, and he became a lot less of a civil rights figure and a lot more of a rich, bitter millionaire who feels like he's being canceled. But this is what Killer Mike is telling us, I think. We have to protect Dave Chappelle. He is not the real enemy. The real enemy are the politicians who are pushing against trans rights. That's the real enemy. J.K. Rowling is not the real enemy either. Listen, okay? I have the complete Jim Dale Harry Potter. I used to listen to these like every summer all the way through. I can't listen to it now. I'm not going to go see Fantastic Beasts. I can't think about J.K. Rowling without getting sad. Because I think about my loved ones who are trans, and I think about what she's doing, and it makes me sad. I can't listen to it. It's not even that I don't want to, or that I think it's wrong. I literally cannot listen to J.K. Rowling. And I understand. I'm not even saying if it's good or bad. I'm telling you that is my physical reaction, okay? But she's not the enemy. She's not. And if you'd like to see a great video about that, if you haven't seen ContraPoint's video on J.K. Rowling, that is the statement about it. She is not the real enemy either. She is a feminist hero. Dave Chappelle is a hero of Black America. And look at who we're trying to take down. We can't reach those scum-sucking pigs in power. We can't touch them. We can't get to them. We're nowhere near taking them down. They don't even feel our fingernails on the hem of their jeans. You understand me? We're nowhere near them. But we can take down Rowling. We can take down Chappelle. We can do that. So listen, I'm not celebrating July 4th this year, okay? I am proud of America. I do think it is the most racially diverse, the most equality-driven country in the world. I think it has provided the most freedoms for the oppressed. I am proud of it being the longest-running continuous democracy. But I'm not celebrating because I'm seeing that go away. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm seeing it go away. But it's not my dumb friends on Facebook who are anti-woman. And it's not Kid Rock. Kid Rock isn't the enemy. Okay? This is the enemy. The Supreme Court. We have to fight the real enemy. You understand me? We have to fight the real enemy. All right. So, that's my political statement. It's the most political I've ever been on this channel, but I wanted to do something for July 4th because it is hard to love America as much as I love America and be as despairing as I am. Maybe I am patriotic. Blue shirt, white skin, red with rage. Who knows? What Killer Mike is doing here, by having Chappelle on this. I don't think we should confuse it with Kanye or with Kendrick platforming problematic characters on their albums. It's similar, but I don't think it's in the same area. I mean, I think Kanye's doing it as kind of basically just a anti-cancel culture thing, which is not his best instinct. I think Kendrick is doing it in an interesting way to sort of show that even though he has an elevated position in terms of how he's perceived of as an African-American artist, fundamentally his life experience and his expression is not that different from Kodak Black. What I think Killer Mike is doing here is he is challenging me. He's challenging you. He's challenging you if you're sitting there and you're pissed at me because you thought I was an ally, and I'm defending Killer Mike for having Dave Chappelle because you thought he was an ally. He's challenging liberal listeners. He is platforming somebody who has profoundly wrong-headed views on trans rights. Calling yourself a TERF is not funny. And he is totally wrong, right? I mean, who are the real enemies? Dave Chappelle's real enemies are not the people who are telling him to shut up about trans rights. That's not the source of systematic racism. But what I love about what Killer Mike does with this song is that he is making sure that either we have his back or we don't. Because Run the Jewels is a great project. I love Run the Jewels. That's one of the reasons my channel has as many viewers as it has, is because of my work on Run the Jewels. But that's easy. That's easy listening for white liberals. I mean, and I'm not even saying just because half of the group is white. I mean, that might help some people, but that was actually a block to me, right? But the fundamental point of that album, you know, if you kind of boil it down, is very in line with Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter is an easy movement for us to support. It is. You know, I still have the sign out front. All right? It's still an important thing to say. And just because it's easy doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because it's easy doesn't mean we shouldn't still be fighting for it. And just because it's easy doesn't mean it's still not completely necessary. And I don't know why anybody took the signs out of their front lawn, because we're still being reminded constantly that Black lives are not being protected and understood as being human. But it's this new statement that's in this song. Okay, there's a flag in the video that someone waves that says, protect black art. And by extension, protect black artists. Protect them. Don't attack, protect. So he also has Young Thug on this song. And in theory, Young Thug and Killer Mike are polar opposites. You know, Killer Mike is a conscious. He's on CNN and he's doing these interviews and he's, as a white liberal, I have to admit there's some little part of me in the back of my head that says this sentence. He's one of the good ones. Now listen, I'm admitting something that I'm not proud of, and I would never say that out loud, and I don't actually think it. But there's some part of me, some lizard, racist, son of a bitch part of me, programmed by the white supremacy, which I have benefited from my entire life, and that still determines our entire United States of America, that thinks he's one of the good ones. You know, he's not just talking about like guns and killing and all that stuff. He's a good fighter who fights for good stuff. Yippee! Young Thug. I reviewed his album. It's fine, but I don't know, cough syrup, and drugs, and guns, and that has nothing to do with Killer Mike. But here is where Killer Mike and Kendrick are perhaps giving us the same perspective. The difference between Killer Mike and an LP of Run the Jewels is great, based on their life experience. But Killer Mike and Young Thug, both being from Atlanta, the differences between them are not that great. To a certain extent, it might largely be luck. So he's challenging us. He's challenging us by making a song that features an artist who is currently in jail and probably spend the rest of his life in jail. Young Thug for drug trafficking and a bunch of other things. I'll get to that later. He's challenging us by making us listen to and appreciate somebody who very much represents a lot of odious views that we are trying to fight against. But we have to protect Killer Mike. It's his test. Do we have his back or not? Or are we going to turn our back on him because he platformed the wrong person? That's your challenge, liberal America. And I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not. If you can't do it, if it is too painful, I understand. But that's the challenge. If we don't have Killer Mike's back now, we never had it. So 15 minutes into my video, how about I talk about the song? How about that, Sky? It's produced by No ID, which is pretty wild. You know, one of the great rap producers, probably one of the top 10 rap producers of all time. And it's a very jarring song. It starts off with this church organ with Dave Chappelle speaking. He talks about storming the beach at Normandy and how that's essentially what black Americans have to do. Little side note here about American nationalism. Don't go to Normandy if you're an American. When you go to France, the Eiffel Tower is great. Go to the Eiffel Tower. It's an amazing place. Notre Dame's fine. Go to the Louvre if you have a couple days. But don't just go to Normandy. You know how many Americans do that? They go all the way across the damned world to go to a place to look at a beach so that they can say how great Americans are. Go to a cathedral. Go to Reims. Go to Bourges. Go to Chartres. Go to Amiens. Go to the south of France. Check out the Roman ruins. Check out the Roman ruins in the south of France, in the town of Arles, as opposed to traveling across the country just to reaffirm American dominance. Okay, side note. I'm also against nationalism, not just against racism. But this idea of storming the beach at Normandy is fascinating because it puts forth this same idea that African Americans in America are constantly in a state of siege and are being shot and taken down. And as he says, there is no rhyme or reason why it is not you on the ground, but keep your feet moving. And this is that sense of the difference between Killer Mike and Young Thug is happenstance. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know the history. I don't know Killer Mike's upbringing. I don't know his education. I don't know Young Thug's upbringing. I don't know Young Thug's education. I have no idea. I don't know what part of Atlanta they grew up in. I don't know if one part's different than another. I don't know what block it is. But I do know that this statement in here, there's no rhyme or reason why it's not you on the ground, just keep going. So that's this message. And Dave Chappelle's message, I get it, you hate Dave Chappelle, I understand, but his message is so beautiful. You can be scared. And you know what? I think you can extend this to any fight for equality. That's not Dave Chappelle's point. But if you want to take his words and apply it to your struggle, even if your struggle isn't directly related to that of African Americans in America, I think you can. Because what does he tell us? The fact that you're here and that you survived is luck. Keep running. Are you scared? That's fine. Keep running. You're not perfect? That's fine. Nobody asked you to be perfect. Keep running. That's the state. The run towards equality and towards freedom. Now then musically, these really jarring and crazy horns come in. Bang, 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 with some very cool kind of like low trap bass sounds and a trap drum beat, a very simple line. Musically, it's not as interesting as it is politically, but it's still quite interesting musically. Mike's verse is interesting because he starts off talking about having gold and then goes into this chorus, and like Jenny told Forrest Gump. Again, it's interesting. Here's one of my favorite messages to Europeans who visit America. Don't go to Miami or San Francisco or Boston. You can go to New York, but if you go to a second city, go to Memphis. Because if you go to Memphis, you can go to the Civil Rights Museum. In order to get to the Civil Rights Museum, you have to take Nathan Bedford Forrest Highway, and that's America for you. Forrest Gump was named after Nathan Bedford Forrest, the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. So, interesting here that this idea of keep running is thrown in here when Forrest Gump himself, even his name is a reminder of the history of racism in the South, but keep running, the race for freedom isn't won. And that's the message that he's saying, just to keep running. Talks about being from the west side of Atlanta. Again, that's an interesting message that he's talking about, trying to tie him together with these other rappers from Atlanta who are in jail right now. Politicians lie, and your favorite rapper is a con. And then we had this whole video imagery, which is fascinating because it's all about this one guy running. And when you see him running at first, you don't know if he's a runaway slave, which he is, right? Like, he is both a runaway slave and somebody from 2022 who's running away from injustice. If you see an African-American person running in a field in the South, that's where your mind goes. And then eventually it becomes a little bit like Godard, actually. Godard's movie, For Sympathy for the Devil, that came out in 1968. It feels a little bit like this. There's this bizarre fight that's essentially a race war between black soldiers and white soldiers. Very interestingly, it was filmed in a way in which they're not shooting at each other. They're just like, they're just hitting each other with guns. I think that's on purpose because America couldn't take it. A video where there's an actual race war being depicted could not be seen. This is for the ones that never want. I'm gonna back up. Like, there's something up with the light in this video, and I'm just getting all. I'm getting just beyond white. Whoa, I don't want that to happen. Now I'm blurry. Okay, sorry. I don't edit my videos. If this is your first video of mine, I don't edit. So you just got to bear with me. I'll have another sip of my coffee. And then it gets into Young Thug's verse. And again, I love this idea of Killer Mike and Young Thug not being that different. I think that's why Killer Mike started off his verse talking about his jewelry, because Young Thug starts off talking about name brand stuff. But then it's interesting because as it goes along, even Young Thug gets somewhat political and talks about instilling this need to run into his son. And this is that sad moment where you realize that this is the problem. It's the generational problem of generational trauma that's going on and on and on and on. And we keep hoping it would be over, but it's not. This is the point in the video where there's someone waving "Protect Black Art, Free Gunna, Free Young Thug." Someone wears an armband that says "Free YSL." And this is where we get into this bizarre thing where probably they are guilty of everything that they did, right? I don't know. Probably. It seems as though there's lots of evidence. But I don't think that's the point. I still think it's free them. Because, as I always say, the prevalence of crime in American rap music is not an indictment on the rappers. It's an indictment on America. It's an indictment on the failure of our system. The high African American population in American jails is not an indictment on African Americans, it's an indictment on American jails. I think that's the message, and again, it's about protecting black artists who are not protected. Black artists are dying and being thrown in jail at a ridiculous rate, an outrageous rate. Tell me the last white celebrity who was thrown in jail or died young. You can tell me in the comments, and then tell me how long it took you to think about it. I think I got Philip Seymour Hoffman, who grew up very near me here in Rochester, New York. Okay? I'm just throwing that out there, okay? Now think of the last black celebrity who was thrown in jail or died. How quickly did that come? We need to protect black art and protect black artists. If for no other reason, then for the final image of this video, which features that runner jumping in the air with a fist coming down against 8 people with guns pointed at him. It's this futile gesture. What's he going to do? Is he really going to be able to punch them? Or is he going to be shot by the forces of white supremacy? Is that what's going to happen in this video? Is he going to be shot? Is he going to live? We don't know because the video stops here. There's not been a single shot fired in the video, but this is the point where the shots would be fired. Will this protagonist, will this representation of all black Americans for the entire history of our country that goes way before July 4th, 1776, will he punch them all out and keep running, or will he be shot down? That's the point where we're at. That's the point where hip-hop is. That's the point where black art is. It's in the middle of fighting white supremacy. And we don't know the outcome. We have to fight for the outcome. We have to fight, and that image is in a museum. Obviously, African Americans are the most important artists in the world, and they have been for at least the last 50 years. They are the ones determining the culture across the globe, okay? Hey, the French were doing that in in the early 20th century. The entire art world was just reverberating out of what was happening in France. Well, the entire world right now is reverberating off of African Americans. They are the ones who are determining and designing and directing all levels of culture across the entire world. All right? That's why they're in that museum. That's why this image, because this is the statement. What is going to happen next? Are they going to defeat the forces of white supremacy, or are they going to be shot? That guy running is Killer Mike. That guy running is Dave Chappelle, is Young Thug, is LeBron, is everybody. And we should be protecting them. We should not be the ones shooting. So there's my review. Told you I'd get political. Didn't mean to, but I didn't know what was going to happen when I woke up today, and then I saw this video, and I thought I had to say it. So in conclusion, let's see. I got one little thing. Fight the real enemy. There's the camera.